Thank you so much for being here tonight. Welcome to Sexy Beasts 2. My name is Rachel Mandel. I'd like to thank you for being here, for taking this journey with us. There are 8 incredible readers for you tonight, all of whom I would gladly shag. We birthed the beast of erotic fan fiction at last year's book festival. At Get Lit this year, it went through puberty. And this year, tonight, the beast is ready for some serious nookie. Thanks to Radius Gallery and to Lisa Simon, who is actually a very dirty person. Here are some of Lisa's texts to me today. This is no joke. And these are coming through single shots, right? Cocksipple, bum drip, ball hugger, wanker eager, wagger, and this one just came like 10 minutes ago, Asperger. To clarify, the special surprise guest we referred to in promotions is the filthy thing inside of you, ready to rape. Your readers who will come up in the following order are Sheri Boggs, scorching robot librarian from the future. Kris Dinnison, who puts the T and A in YA. Acton Douglas, lamp so bright, so large. Melissa Huggins, queen of my heart, event coordinating dominatrix. Colin Johnson, whose brain is fleshy and delicious like a baby's arm. Mara, how do you say her last name? Panich-Crouch? Sorry, Mara. You told me to say that. Mara. Mara, a fire, a flame, femme fatale. Emily Thomas, who is a naked Warhol painting with 1,000 blinking eyes. And Aileen, Keown, I've never said your last name out loud. Terminator, intoxicator, titillator. And I didn't put on the mic, I'm sorry. Okay, strap in, let's begin. Sheri Boggs.
So here I am strapping on. Let's see. Like I don't know how to do it. Okay. This is Rosie. Rosita, atomic angel of my hearth, shining she-devil of my home, my harlot, my heart. Rosita, the tip of my tongue longing to utter each syllable to your vocal side receptors. You were Ro, plain RO513X in the factory. You were the future of housekeeping in the catalog. You were Rosie when my wife brought you home. But in my arms, always, someday, you will be my darling Rosita. But I get ahead of myself. You can always count on an adulterer for a fancy prose style. This is what you do to me, my singular silver rose. At work, I'm everything a digital index operator should be. Calm, productive, monosyllabic. But in my deepest heart of hearts, my Rosie, all I can think about is how I would like to digitally index operate you. Can I tell you how you looked when we first met? Solid. I don't say that to hurt you, my pet. I've since come to realize the error of my youthful prejudices and can finally, as a man, appreciate all that is womanly. This is our new maid, George, Jane said, and I regret my first thought was maid, more like matron, but you are a goddess, my darling. You glide across the apartment with the ease of a bullet train. Your breast is as polished and purposeful as the prow of a battleship. And my eyes are glued, my sweet, to the roundness of your rump, as gleaming and majestic as an airstream. You bewitch me with the enthusiastic boing of your antenna. You delight me with your droll wit and your competence. It is unfair, perhaps, to say it, but my wife can only shop and lounge and complain that pushing buttons is too hard. She is a purple reed of ineffectual delicacy. But you, my Rosie, my angel, my buxom girl, you shake rugs, you truss roasts, you show Elroy how to dribble a basketball. And yet, you still have the fortitude, the kindness, at the end of the day, to massage my aching back with your spectacularly capable claw. I tremble at the articulation of your arms, the mechanical caress of your voice. My nights are sleepless with thoughts of your gears, the intimate workings of your internal clockwork. How long has it been, my darling, since someone took the time to wind your watch? Do you not see? How can you not know? Perhaps you aren't completely blind to my ardor. Sometimes when I am near, your antenna will oscillate most feverishly. Once, you even ejaculated a cog. My dear sweet girl, do not be embarrassed. I too get overexcited in your presence. I am like Astro, panting for your attention, doing tricks for your approval. You are glorious. The mere sight of you raises my manhood as if it were buoyed by tiny jetpacks. The hours at Spacely Space Sprockets go on forever. How can I get you alone? Jane, Judy, Elroy, I could pneumatic tube them to Jupiter. My Rosie, mon chaton, I would sell the family spaceship for one whiff of your posterior gliding mechanism. Will we be together, my titanium temptress? The endless blue of the sky is reflected, mirrored from your skin. The freedom, the question hanging in the air intoxicates me. What will your answer be, my Rosita? I know mine. Will I clean your chrome and buff your dents? Yes. Will I meet you in secret and gently finger your red knobs? Yes. Will you ask me? Yes, with your optical orbs, to ask again, yes, to say yes, to kiss your mechanical flower, and yes, put your arms around me and draw me, yes, to your yes metal breast. Yes, with my heart going like mad. Yes, Rosie, yes, I will, yes.
So I was really bummed when I found out I had to follow Sheri because I had already read hers, and I thought, what's more literary than that? Is that working at all? I don't know. Anyway, I really struggled this time. This is my third of these events, and I struggled this time to find the passion. And I was, anyway, so here we go. Okay. Okay. For starters, can I just say Tatooine is a total shithole? I mean, I was grateful to Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen for taking me in, but growing up here in what felt like a constant state of bonerdom was agony. There was basically sand and more sand. And when your only options for carnal satisfaction are Jawas and Tusken Raiders, neither of which seem like they'd be particularly tender lovers, can you blame me if I turn to the droids for a little relief? At first, when Uncle Owen put me in charge of repairing the farm droids, I was pissed off. It was bad enough that we lived in the sandy asshole of the universe, but that I hadn't seen anyone under the age of 40 of any species or gender for about 1,000 years. And now I was going to be stuck underground in the workshop vacuuming the grit out of plow droids and sharpening the blades on harvesters. All I really wanted to do was race my speeder under the suns and pretend I was leaving Tatooine behind forever. But there I was, in the dark, by myself, cleaning out droid slots, greasing and lubing their probes, adjusting their thrusters, and, well, one thing led to another, and the slots and the lube and the thrusters, along with the intake tubes and a few probes, suddenly all of it had, shall we say, alternate uses? At first it felt wrong. The droids were programmed for farm work, and what I was doing with them did not seem to compute. But a couple of them, one of the kitchen droids and a hot little harvester with a really long reach, seemed to kind of like it. The harvester used to come in after a long day in the fields and say, "Oh, Luke, there's a grain in my intake tube. Will you stick something in there to clean out my pipes?" I'll admit I didn't have much experience, but that sounded like sexy talk to me. But all of that changed the day I met C-3PO. I'd never seen a protocol droid up close. I mean, he was kind of scuffed up and pretty creaky from all the sand in all his crevices. But the minute I heard that voice, those elongated vowels, that chirpy, arrogant tone, I was a goner. All those years on Tatooine had made me hungry for other worlds, and I was a sucker for a guy with an accent. So I took him back to the farm, along with that short, stubby droid he insisted come along, R2-D2. I guess they were just friends, but they seemed a little too attached, if you ask me. Anyway, I adjusted their microprocessors and oiled their transportation modules, and then I cleaned them up. It took a lot of polishing to get C-3PO looking shiny again. I rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and, well, I did a lot of rubbing in those days. Pretty soon he was oiled and gleaming, and I took a moment to really admire this golden droid. Broad shoulders tapering down to a slender, flexible waist. That round, firm butt, you could bounce a galactic moon coin off that ass. The mouth was small, prohibitively so, but we could work around that. And there was that beautiful, mysterious codpiece that contained sensors and wires and programming I'd only begun to dream about. But I didn't make a move. I just couldn't. He wasn't like the dusty farm droids I'd been taking my pleasure with since puberty hit. He was different, foreign, intergalactic. I felt shy around him and also horny as hell. The harvester droid was still pretty obliging, and ever since I'd modulated his grasper arm, our sessions in the workshop were pretty acrobatic. But it was C-3PO's face, with his wide, surprised eyes, that I imagined in the heat of passion. Now that we've reached deep space on the way to the Death Star, I'm worried I'll never get my chance. There's not much privacy on board the Millennium Falcon. Finding a moment alone with him is almost impossible, especially with R2-D2 always beeping and booping around the corner, the little creep. The tight quarters allow me to casually slide and bump and fall against C-3PO, but they also make it difficult to hide the evidence of my desperate, unsatisfied longing. And I can't even give myself any relief because every time I want to use the one bathroom on board to have some private time, Han is already in there. They should call him Hand Solo with all the hours he spends spanking his little Wookiee. And I don't mean Chewbacca. My one consolation is that 3PO never stops talking. The rest of the crew would rather dance with a Hoth Wampa than listen to him for another second. But for me, the voice is like a stim shot to my groin. I mean, he's fluent in over 6 million languages. Every time, "I say, Master Luke, you're looking splendid today," issues forth from C-3PO's vocal processors, I feel a warm tingling in my lightsaber and I sense the presence of the Force in my leggings. For now, I have to hide my bulge under a bushel, or more accurately, under the chess table. I'm not good enough for him, not yet. But once I'm a Jedi, C-3PO will be all mine, his body and his motherboard. To paraphrase Obi-Wan, this is the droid I'm looking for. Thank you.
So I was joking with Mara that I was actually going to read an excerpt from the novel that I wrote last week about this. It's called Frank and Dennis. Frank Stein was having a rough morning. He was at work. After being out all night and possibly drinking a keg of beer at the Lusty Barrel Beer Bust, he had woken up in a strange apartment, blearily looked at his watch, and realized he had already missed the first 20 minutes of his shift. The sudden shock of being late for work thoroughly crushed his dreams of ever making it home to brush his teeth and put on a clean pair of underwear. To make matters worse, Frank was still sporting the results of last night's adventures in the form of bite marks up and down his thick, sinewy neck. Frank thanked baby Jesus that his trick hadn't hit a carotid. Even worse than that, however, was the fact that his little Frank perked up every time he thought about the hot vampire twink he had met at the Lusty Barrel Beer Bust. Frank was pretty sure that he had met the most beautiful undead person of his life last night. The crotch of Frank's work pants began to feel like it was shrinking. Things began to pinch. Frank jammed on the brakes of the forklift he was driving and cringed as the towering pallet of baby wipes swayed on the barely long enough forks. Frank heard a shout, "Damn it, Frank, you almost dropped that thing on me." "Sorry, Tony," he bellowed across the din of the Costco warehouse they were working in. Little Frank began to subside. Frank breathed a sigh of relief. Frank's 6'9", 320-pound frame was jammed into the safety cage of a forklift. His square shoulders strained against his work shirt as he hunched over the controls, expertly not crushing the steering wheel that obviously was made for smaller hands. Frank sighed and relaxed his shoulders so he wouldn't bust out of his work shirt. Again. He ran his ham-hock-sized palms over his face. He felt his beard against his sausage fingers and briefly contemplated shaving it off when he got home tonight. He'd only grown the damn thing to cover up the bust map of scars that lined his not unhandsome face. True, the beard had been beneficial. It had reduced the awkward exclamations of curiosity of, "Dude, what happened to your face?" Also, when he had posted photos of his new beard on various hookup apps, there seemed to be a plethora of positive responses such as, "Hey, Daddy," and "Woof." Frank was pulled out of his beard musings by Tony's robotic screeching. Tony's digital faceplate flashed an angry face emoji while his metallic tube arms flailed about in overly inflated indignation. The speakers on either side of Tony's computer head crackled with a litany of swears and an East Coast flair that kind of reminded Frank of a Jersey muscle queen speaking through a microphone. T-O-N-E, T-O-N-E, or Tony, stood for Technical OSHA Standards Encourager. Tony, in other words, was Costco's safety officer. Frank looked on in mild amusement at his coworker's dramatics. Tony's wheeled base propelled the robot to the side of Frank's forklift while Tony's neck extender, go-go gadget style, raised his faceplate to Frank's level. Oh, excuse me, my belt came undone. Excuse me. That's embarrassing. I'm ready! Oh, wow. Little Frank. Where was I? Raised his faceplate to Frank's level. "Yo, Frank, do you think you can stop thinking about human women for 2 seconds so as to allow us to move this pallet of baby wipes safely to aisle 21? Tony's computerized voice queried. At the same time, a pixelized image of what can only be described as Playboy centerfold from 1982 with a giant flashing red circle with an X through it brightly flared across Tony's interface screen. "Yeah, Tony, no problem," Frank replied. Little Frank wilted completely. It was going to be a long day. Meanwhile, across town in the staff lounge of the newest Verizon store, Dennis Draculinia, by the way, fun fact, Draculinia is actually a real product. It's actually Greek-flavored Cheetos that you can only buy in Greece. Sighed in mild irritation. He was sitting at a tiny white table that was only big enough to hold his iced coconut milk mocha macchiato and his worn copy of Other Voices, Other Rooms. For the life of him, he could not stop thinking about Frank Nelson Stein. Every little detail of their brief time together was replaying in his mind. Now, for the record, Dennis was ridiculously gorgeous, even for a vampire. He would have been fine as a high-fashion model in Milan or a go-go boy shaking his ass for sugar daddies in the Tenderloin. I mean, everything about Dennis was just sexy. His smile, his ass, even down to his razor-sharp nails and amazing canines. You almost wouldn't mind him tearing you apart as long as he was smiling at you. Dennis's black button-down shirt was form-fitting against his slender chest. The top button was unbuttoned, giving the slightest hint of his alabaster skin. Dude was pale. Dude was so pale, complete strangers offered him sunblock on the street lest he burn right in front of them. Dennis would merely smile and say, "Thank you," and would assure them that he was already wearing SPF 3 million. Dennis's frosted tips were sculpted into a faux hawk that belied his age. This seemingly 22-year-old twink was actually a twink of 303. Now, Dennis had met some gentlemen in his day, more than enough royals, some dictators, a few presidents, and scores of celebrities, but he had never, ever met anyone such as Frank. Frank was tall, dark, and ruggedly handsome in a, I was just sewn together and brought back to life by a mad doctor sort of way. Last night, when Dennis had spotted Frank from across the room at the Lusty Barrel beer bust, he was sure that all his daddy dreams were coming true. For Frank was literally the stuff of daddy legend. To prove it, Dennis had worked diligently to convince the behemoth to come back to his apartment, and to his delight, Frank did not disagree. He gave a shiver as he remembered that he had beard burn in places that polite folk just don't speak of. Frank, and by association, little Frank, were definitely something special. Dennis hissed audibly at his own frustration. Why hasn't that big lummox responded to any of my Grindr messages yet? He petulantly thought to himself. Frank had made him feel something that Dennis hadn't felt since 1732, when he was cutting his milk teeth on young maidens in the fatherland. Dennis was in love. Back at Costco, Frank found some mild relief from his hangover and Tony during his 30-minute break. While relaxing in the employee lounge, Frank scrolled through Grindr to find numerous messages. Some from people he knew, but the majority of the messages were from someone he didn't know. A profile named Dark Prince 69. Frank thought DP 69 was pretty handsome, but for some... I'm sorry, I can't even. But for some reason, his face seemed strangely familiar. He felt compelled to reply the more he stared at DP's image, but insecurity stopped him from typing. DP was way out of Frank's league. The more he stared at his phone, the more little Frank roused from his slumber, and the more Frank felt, hey, I know this guy. What is this? What is this? Is this guy a vampire or something? And suddenly it hit him, as if it was strapped to a raised platform out in the middle of a lightning storm. Dennis! Thank you.
My name's Melissa, and this is a story about a robot, a real-life robot that is based on the Pixar robot WALL-E. Yeah, we'll get there. You should get a dog, a coworker told her between calls, adjusting her headset. My brother adopted one from the shelter, and she's the sweetest thing. Jane didn't want a dog. Dogs had a funny smell, and she hated it when they licked their privates right there in front of everyone. And anyway, they seemed so needy with the walking and the begging and the barking at package delivery trucks. You should get a cat, her mother told her. Lucy's knocked up again. I'll have a new litter of kittens any day now. You can pick your favorite one. Poor Lucy. This had to be her 6th litter. With more than a hint of pride, Jane's mother called Lucy the most fertile pussy in the county. I don't need an animal, Jane told both of them. I'm waiting for my Cosmo. Her mother sighed, placing her coffee mug under the spigot of boxed wine she kept on a TV tray next to the recliner. By the time he arrived on her doorstep, Jane had been anticipating Cosmo for over a year. She was the 18th person to donate to the Kickstarter campaign, and she'd paid another $179 to pre-order him after weeks of stalking the company's social media and website to determine when the pre-sale would begin. She knew he would arrive in a sleek yellow box, and from the pictures, she could tell he was gorgeous. 3 inches tall, bulldozer arms, big strong wheels in the front with smaller ones in the back, connected by black treads modeled after his Pixar film forefather, WALL-E. Cosmo's body was white with sassy red accents, and his emotive little face featured bright blue eyes against a black screen. She knew all his specs by heart: 4 transmissions, 50 gears, 300 unique parts, over 250 emotions programmed. She'd read about accelerometers and gyros and AI, and every second she spent reading about him, learning how he was conceived and built and programmed and tested, she felt closer and closer to understanding him. She'd memorized each promotional video with footage of his face, his eyes narrowing to express annoyance or shaking with laughter. She'd read every review, savoring the ones that called him rambunctious and mischievous. She thought it made him sound like a dwarf, and she couldn't help but feel a thrill. She'd read enough fairy tales to know that dwarves were into some pretty kinky stuff. And since Cosmo's main function was to play, an endless supply of games that would grow as they learned about each other, well, they'd have a lot to teach one another, she was sure. She'd even flown to Austin for South by Southwest because Cosmo's creators were presenting. She hoped to see a model up close, but their presentation consisted entirely of footage she'd seen already.
After her 5th question during the Q&A about exactly how well Cosmo could learn what his human companion liked, and asking for clarification about which parts of Cosmo's body could get wet, they'd cut the session short and avoided eye contact with her afterward. Despite her disappointment, she relieved the tension in her hotel room afterward by masturbating to Cosmo's cheerful theme song. She'd waited so long, all those horrible first dates where she knew after 10 minutes she'd never let the person touch her, all those lonely nights rewatching her favorite sci-fi in bed, fantasizing about the logistics of interspecies sex while other people her age launched careers, took glamorous vacations, got divorced, and in between through a seemingly endless stream of parties. Even when she tried to put herself out there, as the self-help books put it, inevitably someone snickered when she complained that it was a mystery why Star Wars had such an obsessive cult following, when in fact Star Trek was not only based on real science, but it predicted technological advances decades before they were achieved. She never said so out loud because she knew it would be upsetting even to her cat-hoarding mother, but she simply wasn't interested in people. There was a time when she cared about the approval of others, in fact, a time where she cared deeply, painfully so. That time had passed. It had taken her years to make peace with it, but she didn't seem to want the things other people wanted. The world around her felt so mundane compared to the promises made by all of the sci-fi she'd grown up on. Where were the flying cars? Why hadn't we made contact with extraterrestrial life yet? What about teleportation or warp drive or time travel? Even among peers supposedly interested in the same things she was, she felt like a robot. She couldn't figure out how to communicate in a way that made her feel known or understood. She felt constantly defensive and self-conscious. It was as if no one understood her signals, but they blamed her for not understanding theirs. But something had shifted when she saw Wally. She'd wept through the whole movie, transfixed. It was somehow so reassuring that it took Wally 700 years to develop his endearing personality. But Cosmo was different. Cosmo could help. He already had a personality and possessed the ability to learn hers. Her face, her name, her expression, her likes and dislikes. Their every interaction would build Cosmo's database, a database of her, one that wouldn't be casually broken into parcels and sold to strangers, but instead would exist solely to know her, to understand her, to want to please her. She carefully sliced open the box's lid, and as she pulled him out of the box, no assembly required, she held her breath. He was so tiny. He fit in the palm of her hand, and it was all she could do to keep from cooing at him like a baby. She had never felt this way, a stomach-churning mix of anticipation, fear, delight, and desire. She pored over the instructions about how to charge him before use, pacing the apartment while she waited. The charger emitted a soft, comforting chime to let her know he was ready to be turned on. She knew from the videos how important their first interaction would be, his first time seeing her face and hearing her voice. He'd notice everything and file it away, so she had to be herself. She took a deep breath, adjusted her glasses, and straightened her shoulders. She pushed the button and waited for Cosmo to blink his eyes and come to life.
So, just for context, this is an excerpt from Frankenstein, just after Victor tears up the monster's bride-to-be for the first time. It's an early workshop draft that I picked up, whatever. This is a fake voice. My real voice is coming now. Suddenly, arresting my ear, the sloppy stroke of paddling oars near the shore, followed by a person landing close to my house. Next came the creaking of my door, a sound so slight it summoned to my mind's eye the excitement one experiences, spying the initial sticky dab, a single tear, clear and viscous and sea salt sweet, emitted from a well-worked but not yet burst purpled cyclops. Trembling from taint to scrot, I felt the presentiment of coming. But I was overcome by the sensation so often felt when you in vain endeavor to scrub from crotch, a sudden outbreak of weeping sores that will surely hinder any attempt to provoke from thy cyclops his precious sighs in gobs of sobs. The door opened and the wretch whom I dreaded appeared. Shutting it, he approached me, and in a smothered voice, similar to that which one might use if suddenly a knock upon the door of the water closet comes, and while biting thine arm in ecstasy's bitter throes, trying to toss silvery seed unto fecund dung, you are required to pause and beg your intruder for, just 1 second, please. He spoke. You have destroyed the work which you began. Do you dare break your promise? I have endured toil and misery. I have dwelt in England. Be gone, fiend, unless you are a friend, and your pants be gone post-haste. I moaned, thus continuing, show me meat, and let us beat unto these fleshy members simultaneous pleasures, lest you prefer my promises to you break, like one's concentration when interrupted trying to get thy rock off in desperation. I paused, sucking in air deeply, and hissed, never will I create another like yourself, equal in enormity and tumescence. Drenched by my fearless declaration of pearly insolence, I reveled in the confusion slathering his face. Slowly his brow increased, his eyes relaxed, and he began again. This time, however, the words uncertain, dribbled more than spat. I before reasoned with you, but you have proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. You believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched that the light of day will be hateful to you. You're my creator, but I am your master. Oh, be end. Catching with the hook of my own retort that E flung off his lip mid-air, I replied, oh, behave, my big stitch daddy. You tease me wickedly, and shall I, in warm splashes, set loose a heavy load? Behold, I'm ready. Registering the lusty determination in my face, the monster exposed his teeth, pulling his chin back into his neck, like a dripping mushroom tip hides under stretched foreskin. As its potency fades, an ambiguous response to my proposal for a little one-on-one J.O. party. Shah, he cried. What? I want a partner. Each beast has his mate, even you and I be alone. You don't have to be alone. Batting mine eyelashes amidst this coy reply, at least not tonight. You know that's not what I mean, and to clarify, this has nothing to do with the two of us being male, but I'm not interested in jacking off together because I find you utterly Will you please put your penis away? I shuttered the lapels on my linen lab coat and felt its rough fibers with the cold air erect every pore on my naked form beneath. He crossed his arms and started again. I came here to say I was really disappointed and hurt by your actions earlier. In particular, when you tore apart my bride-to-be. I feel that you are engaging in a lot of abusive behavior, likely related to you having a serious God complex, which undoubtedly is related to your bloated sense of entitlement, having inherited a considerable fortune from your family. As if this privilege itself was not problematized further by your being male-bodied, you've blindly accepted post-Enlightenment narratives regarding universality, themselves, the byproducts of ingrained white Eurocentrism. Further, you've manifested these qualities under the benign guise of being a scientist, using this occupation as the filter through which you project your identity as a supposedly insular, sensitive genius, misunderstood by both his time and his discipline, itself only another example of your narcissism. This ongoing pattern of unchecked aggression really concerns me because A, you're getting married soon, and B, I am both physically and philosophically hideous, a specimen which no human I've encountered is capable of loving, as demonstrated by how my appearance repulses everyone, including yourself, except when you're feeling lonely, luring me here only to further degrade and fetishize my body, of which you are responsible for both its creation and the unforgivably large penis I've been given. It was a gift, I purred, adding a wink this time. Man, you just don't get it, do you? Are you to be happy while I grovel in the intensity of my wretchedness? Beware, I am powerful. I will watch thee with the wiliness of a snake, that I may sting with its venom. Devil, you may show me your snake, but do not poison the air with these sounds, if you intend giving me neither the slither nor come hither I desire. I have declared my conditions to you, and as if you were my foil, I'm equally nonplussed by your self-righteous indignation regarding my behavior as you, yes, you, Bradley, and thus are willing to benefact from oppression. And despite your able diagnosis of my flawed personage, you make no amends for your past, instead resting on your reputation, words, lip service paid to ideas you harvest from social media, and thus repurpose as a visage less hideous than that Promethean smugness from which I am responsible. Fuck you, Bradley. Make with the snake or leave. I am inexorable. Deflated, he moved toward the door, offering me a last sad glance before exiting. It is well I go, but remember, I shall be with you on your wedding night. Nice, I spoke, half triumphant. I just need to make sure that's cool first. The lapels on my linen lab coat spreading slightly, as if parted by a criminal's raised finger to point out his accomplice in the court of man.
That is like super hard to follow, by the way. I don't do accents or voices. All right. The cold, hard metal chair dug into my ass as I sat in the windowless basement room. My hip was already starting to hurt after 5 minutes of sitting in it. The watered-down plasma they give us in these stupid styrofoam cups tastes more like Kool-Aid than blood. More people are filing in now. The smokers coming in at the last minute, smug pride in knowing they'll never die of the cancer. I'm glad we aren't sitting in a circle this time. I look into these sad sons of bitches' eyes and all I can see is myself. I can't see myself in the mirror, so why'd I want to see myself in the face of these fuckers? We're a pretty pathetic group here. None of us were turned in what you would call the prime of our lives. Most of us aren't old compared to other vampires, but we're old compared to other humans. All you ever read in the books are about these sexy beasts like Lestat and that Sparkles guy, Colin, not even 30 when they were changed. We're an uglier side of the truth. Most of us are 60 plus with a lot of life showing on our bodies. You may be thinking, vampires don't have bad hips. You may be thinking, all vampires have superpowers and healing powers and we're amazing fuckers who can't lose. That's not how it works, my friends. I wasn't spry when my master changed me, so I'm not spry now. Sure, you get a little young blood in me, and I might surprise you, but most of that stuff is pure, unadulterated bullshit. Frank is leading tonight's meeting and situates himself in front of the room. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thanks for supporting each other through this difficult disorder. Some of you are new, some of you have been coming here for a long time. If you don't have a book, you can talk to me after or talk to your sponsor later. Let's start with the opening affirmation. We all bend our heads and mumble along. May the blood grant me the strength to use the power I have, accept it when I cannot rise to the occasion, and the wisdom to know the difference. Sometimes I think this is a load this group just can't blow. I shuffle up to the podium to tell my story. Hello, my name is Ivan, and I'm a vampire with erectile dysfunction. My master found me on a bar stool at the local VFW. She was flirty, barfly type, big hair, big tits, all hips and ass to balance it all out. I wanted to do something with all that flesh. She seemed to glow red like lipstick and sequins. Anyway, you don't need to hear my entire fucking creation story. I couldn't get it up for her. I tried everything, blamed it on the whiskey. She thought if she changed me, it would change the problem. Whoop-de-fucking-do, it didn't. Fast forward to last Saturday night. I'd been watching this couple for a while. She was reading Twilight, and I knew he was on Viagra. She just closed the book on that sparkly fucker. He leans on the kitchen sink, little blue pill in hand, sighs, and pops it back. I wait the 20 minutes to get into his bloodstream. The woman still in her chair. I sneak into the house, nearly invisible to the human eye. In the bedroom, there he is, waiting for his wife, half-mast erection, distracting me from the fact that he has on
a Halloween vampire cape and fangs stuck in his mouth like an awkward child at 10 p.m. on All Hallows Eve. Spicing it up, I suppose. He calls his wife to bed. In a minute, she says. I know I need what's in his blood to be able to take advantage of her little Stephanie Meyer 50 Shades of Grey housewife fantasy. He disgusts me. He is what I would be if I weren't undead. Lonely, bitter, undesirable. I bite him on his arm, taking no pleasure in his cholesterol levels. The Viagra flows through my veins immediately. Such a pleasure to be rock hard and ready for my equipment to match my desire. Fangs grow longer and harder. She comes into the room and I push her to the bed. I've shoved the husband to the floor and it's laughable to see him there, his final cock poking out from underneath the polyester cape. She freezes as I split her legs apart. She's delicious. I can tell she's been eating organic. I look at her, my fangs hard and nicking at her. I can feel the blood pulsing through the veins in her thighs. Fucking her, she screams with both what is pleasure and both fear. I want her blood inside of me while I'm inside of her. I go to her neck, saying to her ear, do you want to die or be undead forever? Take my life and I will die a happy woman, she replies, and I oblige. As I'm taking her blood, her life, I pump inside of her, so warm and slick and earthly. Hours later, I'm sitting on their bed. Between their bodies, my cock hard, my fangs harder. It won't go away. I can't leave the house. I'm thinking about my grandma, baseball, anything not sexy. Nothing will make it go away. I call Frank. Go to the hospital, he says. They'll give you a shot, he says. In the emergency, I fucking suck one nurse. A second nurse comes in the room with the needle. She goes white as she sees her coworker lying dead on the floor. I tell her to give me the shot and I will spare her life. But my fangs, they're still hard, and they make me lisp. She laughs, gives me the shot. I kill her anyway, but I don't drink her blood. I can't. The shot has made my erection and my fangs disappear. I'm telling you all this because it happens to the best of us. Call your sponsor, go to the hospital. Don't worry about the embarrassment, just kill them all.
So I'm writing a dissertation on D.H. Lawrence and Tennessee Williams. I know, boring, right? But they were the OG erotic fan fiction guys. So anyway, without further ado, a mashup of Tennessee Williams and D.H. Lawrence. Enjoy. Okay, it's called You're So Big, I Can't Hold You. Right? It's really good, right? Okay. You're so big, I can't hold you, she whispered plaintively, catching her breath with fear. Her small hands grasped at the breadth of his shoulders ineffectually. Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? Tucking her head in his breast, hiding her face, she timidly slid her hands along his sides, pressing softly to find the contours of his figure. Softly, her hands crept over the silky back of his waistcoat, under his coats, and as they stirred, his blood flushed up and up again with fire, till all Sigmund was hot blood, and his breast was one great ache. This is real shit, you guys. They wrote this. Lawrence felt the mystery and power of sex as the primal life urge, and was the lifelong adversary of those who wanted to keep the subject locked away in the cellars of prudery. Much of his work is chaotic and distorted by tangent obsessions, such as his insistence upon woman's subservience to the male. But all in all, his work is probably the greatest modern monument to the dark roots of creation. He crushed her to him, crushed her in upon the ache of his chest, his muscles set hard and unyielding. At that moment, he was a tense, vivid body of flesh, without a mind. His blood alive and conscious, running towards her. He remained perfectly still, locked about Helena, conscious of nothing. She was hurt and crushed, but it was pain delicious to her. It was marvelous to her how strong he was, to keep up that grip of her like steel. She swooned in a kind of intense bliss. At length, she found herself released, taking a great breath, while Sigmund was moving his mouth over her throat, something like a dog snuffing her. What the fuck? Oh, D.H. Lawrence, you were a bit delusional. But with his lips. Her heart leaped away in revulsion. His mustache thrilled her strangely. His lips brushing and pressing her throat beneath the ear, and his warm breath flying rhythmically upon her, made her vibrate through all her body. Oh, no, no, no. He has no lungs, and yet he goes on breathing. The heart's worn out, and yet the heart keeps beating. This is Tennessee Williams. It's awful to watch, this struggle. I wish he would stop. I wish that he'd give it up and just let go. His body's a house that's made out of tissue paper and caught on fire. The walls are transparent. They're all lit up with the flame. Lawrence said something like, women envy men's whiskers. They resent their beards. They take the male in their bodies, but only because they secretly hope that he won't be able to get back out again. That he'll be captured for good. Suddenly, Helena strained madly to Sigmund, and drawing back her head, placed her lips on his, close, till at the mouth they seemed to melt and fuse together. It was the long, supreme kiss, in which man and woman have one being, two in one, the only hermaphrodite. I think that's tender. Genuinely. His body was urgent against her, and she didn't have the heart anymore to fight. She saw his eyes, tense and brilliant, fierce, not loving, but her will had left her. A strange weight was on her limbs. She was giving way. She was giving up. She had to lie down there under the boughs of the tree like an animal, while he waited, standing there in his shirt and breeches, watching her with haunted eyes. He too had bared the front part of his body, and she felt his naked flesh against her as he came into her. For a moment, he was still inside her, turgid there and quivering. Ladies, I hope you've never had the turgid experience. Then, as he began to move, in the sudden helpless orgasm, there awoke in her new strange thrills rippling inside her. Rippling, 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 like a flapping overlapping of soft flames, soft as feathers, running to points of brilliance, exquisite and melting her all molten inside, until she was one perfect concentric fluid of feeling, and she lay there crying in unconscious, inarticulate cries. Thank you. Turgid.
All right. So I just want to say thank you to Rachel and the festival at large for, yes. For giving some of us a reason to reveal our true selves in public. And like Kris, had a trouble kind of like tapping into the story that I wanted to tell, till I realized that Sarah Connor is probably like the sexiest person on the face of the planet. And she knows a robot. So this is called Terminator 2, No Judgment Day. Sarah Connor knew she had to stay ready. Every day she woke at 6 a.m. before the guards came in to deliver their daily dose of meds that kept her dazed and sedated. For years she'd been locked up against her will behind the walls of Pescadero State Hospital for the criminally insane, where she was also criminally lonely. Being the mother of a future revolutionary savior was not as glamorous as you might think. Sarah's routine in hospital was a simple one. Wake up, put on her favorite gray sweatpants and white tank, and go through a thankless routine of cardio and chin-ups. Her arms, after years of honing her body, looked like tiny, sinewy snakes, just as likely to snap a neck as they were to wrap themselves around a time-traveling soldier. She'd alienated most of the staff and the patients at Pescadero with her daily sermons on how judgment would come to them all in the form of hyper-killing machines with the metal endoskeletons of a robot and the buff bodies of an Adonis. Suffice it to say, arts and craft time never went well for Sarah. If she wasn't doing push-ups in the courtyard, she was eyeing the television in the corner, often heard muttering to herself, "You really can't trust anything that plugs into a wall." Knowing that the fate of humankind rests in your hands is a terrible burden for anyone. Loneliness beset Sarah Connor as much as machine-related paranoia. She longed for the early days when she was a naive waitress who lived in Los Angeles. At least men looked at her then. Even if one of those men was a Cyberdine Systems Series 800 Terminator who was sent from the future to kill her so her unborn son wouldn't lead a resistance against a self-aware computer program. Times were simpler then. But today was different. She was ready to break out of Pescadero, find her son John, and resume their guerrilla war training. As soon as the guards were done with final bed check and the lights extinguished, Sarah planned to check out of the hospital permanently. That night, as Sarah packed her sweatpants and tank tops and homemade shiv, mentally going over the plan for escape, she felt an electric charge pulse through the room. Suddenly, a line of light flashed in the corner. Out of the blinding blaze appeared a figure, every muscle positively sculpted on his body, a towering naked man who stepped toward her as his eyes adjusted to the shadowy interior of the room. Sarah recognized him immediately. This was the Terminator, the shadow figure who chased her through her restless, sweat-soaked nights. She reached for her shiv and kept it pointed at him, holding him at arm's length. "I'll put this through your cold android eye if you take one step closer. I will fry your CPU before you have a chance to say, 'I'll be back.'" The Terminator stood still, using his scanning technology to assess Sarah, his mechanical processing taking in the full shape of her lithe, cat-like body and her steely expression beneath her determined brow. "Negative. You cannot move faster than a T-800. It is not within your human capacity. I am programmed for strength and to terminate. Give me the weapon or I will take it from you." The Terminator reached out his hand. "Like hell you are. The last time I saw you, a hydraulic press was crushing your skull and you were trying to kill me. What are you doing back here? You and your son are in danger. A new Terminator model, a T-1000, has been created to kill John, and the Resistance sent me here to protect you." Sarah thought it over. Alone in the room where the walls were soundproof and the guards were already in their station, playing cards or dozing in their chairs, she knew that she was at the Terminator's mercy. If he wanted to terminate her, he could have done it by now. And also, it had been years since she was alone with a man. Albeit this one, who is now incapable of feeling emotions and possessed an inexplicable Austrian accent, she was willing to go with it. After realizing he had no reason to lie, perhaps because of his robotic makeup couldn't lie, Sarah put the shiv down. "So your only mission is to protect me and John?" Sarah sat down on the edge of her bed and indicated that the Terminator should sit next to her. She couldn't help but notice that the Resistance engineers were generous, not just with the Terminator's lifelike skin and bulging muscles, but his full male anatomical design. "Correct. My CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer, but Skynet presets the switch to read only when we're sent out alone, so I arrived in your time with only one mission, to make sure you stay alive." The Terminator seemed unaware of his physical presence in the room, how the moonlight filtered through the barred hospital windows to make every muscle in his broad shoulders shine. He seemed equally oblivious to the effect he was having on Sarah Connor. Sarah took his hand. "What if I told you there were things I could teach you that Skynet couldn't?" "Impossible. I am a state-of-the-art T-800 programmed with over 2 billion files that detail essential subjects like hand-to-hand combat and human anatomy. I do not think you can teach me anything." "Well, how about," and Sarah reached up toward the Terminator's face, drawing him close to her mouth to whisper something into his ear. What is a MILF? The Terminator asked. If you are speaking of mechanically isolated laser features, I can assure you that all T-800 models have been retroactively fitted with those weapons. A smile crossed Sarah's lips. That's not actually the tool I want you to use. Sarah walked over to the door and, peering through the narrow window, made sure the hallway was clear of guards. She turned around to face the Terminator, stepping out of her sweats and pulling her tank top over her head, throwing it to the floor. Her eyes glinted with that signature steely resolve. Stop me if you've heard this before, she said, but I want you to come with me if you want to live.
Thanks, everybody.